This is the BreadWinner Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, influencer, and sales wolf, Tyler Harris, bringing you the insights from the most successful forward-thinking entrepreneurs and influencers, so that you can rise to the top and make more dough.
Now, let's get into the show.
What's up, everybody? This is Tyler Harris. This is the BreadWinner Podcast. Glad to have you here. Also glad to have a special guest for today's episode, Mr. Dex Lipovic. And he is someone that I got to know very well this past weekend, but really didn't know at all before then. And that's kind of how I roll.
That's how we roll, baby.
That's super awkward. But man, I'm so glad to have you on, Dex. He is more known, or let's say more infamously known as Dex and the City, which is the most brilliant marketing of all time. And I love that branding. But man, Dex, come on and tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what your main focus is right now. And we'll dive right in.
Tyler, thanks so much, man. It's such a pleasure to be here. Yeah, as you said, we didn't really know each other too well other than on social media, but we really dived in and spent a solid full day together, right?
We did.
Huntington Beach, we did a little brunch,
yep.
Head on up to Beverly Hills, West Hollywood. It was awesome hanging out with you and TJ.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for hanging out with me that day. Got a lot of great rapport building. For everyone, my name is Dex Lipovic on all social media channels, Dex in the City _. I'm a real estate investor, developer, and agent on both coasts, California. Originally from California, but my main focus right now is New York City, hence the name Dex in the City. Spin on the popular culture TV show Sex in the City. And it's funny, I actually got that name. I didn't give that name to myself. It was given to me just based on my love for touring people around New York, people that had never been. I'd been living there at that time for about 4 years, and a good friend of mine kind of dropped it, and that light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, damn, I got to brand this.
That's awesome.
I don't remember what my Instagram handle was prior to that. So locked in as many social media accounts and kind of ran with that in terms of having that as my real estate brand. And it's actually gotten to the point where, obviously, you know my last name, but a lot of my clients and people that connect with me through social don't, kind of find out my last name, maybe let's say on the first appointment or things like that.
Yeah. And I had to ask, I was like, hey man, what is your last name?
Yeah. I mean, I've just been really going hard on it. And even when I was down in Miami, I was like Dex in the beach. In LA, I'm Dex in the hills.
Yes.
I got a very unique 800-acre property out in Fiji that we actually just signed an exclusive for this week.
Wow.
And that's going to be my Dex in the South Pacific.
Yes.
So I'm like kind of like branching off. Yeah, I'm branching off from it. But yeah, man, in terms of brokerage, my main focus is in Manhattan. I do more investing on the West Coast. And yeah, man.
Awesome. So let's kind of get back to the beginning. So you look like a basketball player. Because when I first saw you, I was like, holy crap, I had no idea you're like freaking like what, 6'6"?
6'6".
6'6". So let's take it all the way back to basketball, because you've got some interesting stories there, because you were competitive. And you've got a freaking extremely competitive family, which is awesome. So let's kind of take it back there, because what I found is most people, a lot of what has ultimately become their success has stemmed from that competitive nature all the way back to sports growing up. So what was basketball like for you growing up?
So originally it was actually soccer. My dad played pro, so I actually went against the grain, thinking he thought we were all going to end up playing soccer like him. That was kind of his dream. Actually, his dream was for us to play any sport. He's 5'9" though, and so once we passed that. And I have two other brothers, so the three sons kind of boosted up in height. I don't know. Basketball was really always my passion.
How tall is your mom?
My mom is actually 5'9" as well. So it's
what in the world?
Like she's tall. Yeah, she's tall, but she's not like 6'6" son tall.
Wow.
It's kind of funny. My dad actually loves it. He brags about it all the time. It's just like 6'6", 6'5", 6'4", and then him.
I love it.
So he makes a lot of milkman jokes, but But yeah, for me, I mean, like you said, people that are super competitive in business absolutely hate to lose. I was watching the Cavs Warriors game 1, and I'm going for LeBron, and honestly, it ruined my night just because I'm so ultra competitive.
Yep.
Even when I'm watching other people compete, right? But for me, man, yeah, that was a huge influence for me growing up. It was really my life, probably till age 19, until I actually moved to New York and fully embraced the business world. And I bring a lot of that edge to real estate as well, because it's definitely an eat what you kill industry. It's probably one of the hardest industries to make it in.
That's
especially
true.
out in New York, ultra competitive.
Oh, yeah.
The Shark Tank is what I call it out there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So where do you fall in line with your brothers? Are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest. I
Okay.
set the example.
Got it.
Yeah, I think we were touching upon this earlier. I didn't let him beat me for a long time.
That is awesome. And so let's go right into the time when you went into real estate. What was that like? How did that come about? Did you fall into real estate?
Yeah.
Was real estate something you always had a passion for? How did that all play out?
Yeah, so always had an interest in it. I didn't really gain the full on passion until I dived in head first. But initially, I had transferred universities to go to New York, just because New York, it wasn't even a matter of what university I wanted to go to. It was just a matter of getting to New York, living there. So I only applied to New York schools. And right out of college, I got a job in doing software sales at Xerox. I was like 21. It was just a means to sort of stay in New York, obviously ultra expensive city. And I quickly found that inside sales definitely was my thing, or sales in general was my thing, because I hit, by March of that year, I think it was 2014, I'm sorry, I hit 621% of my yearly quota by March.
Jeez.
So
Wow.
I was like a 21-year-old.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I thought you said
Yeah.
wasn't. I thought you were saying wasn't my thing. And I was like, yeah, of course it wasn't my
Was.
thing. And I was like, oh, was. I was like, oh my God, 621. That's incredible.
Yeah, man.
What the
So,
heck?
yeah,
What the
I-
heck were you doing? What
I was
what
going
was the
hard,
secret
man.
sauce? Yeah.
I closed the U.S. Court of Appeals, so I was doing like software sales for them.
Yeah.
The U.S. Court of Appeals, it ended up closing like 6 stations,
Jeez.
and it just kind of goes back to what TJ was saying, right? So it's you get the appointment over the phone, and then you go hard to close them in person.
Yeah.
But I was 21. I think at that time I was 22. I just turned 22. And the guy thought I was like 30, man. Maybe it's the height. Maybe it's the way I present myself.
Yeah.
After the fact, he found out my age. He flipped out. It was like a 7-year-old guy, head of the U.S. Court of Appeals. And that one helped a lot. A couple other deals. And I knew that really wasn't the end-all, be-all. It was kind of just like a stepping stone. But within 9 months of being at the company, because I had started a year prior, I just felt like I had quickly outgrown it. Needed the next best thing. At that time, what was really inspiring me was watching $1 Million Listing, because that was like season 1.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to live that lifestyle. And it's kind of funny how this all kind of went full circle for me.
Absolutely.
But then I met my future VP randomly out walking our dogs, and she was like, why not take the leap of faith? And at that point, obviously I was like number 2 in the company, in my respective field, and obviously I'd saved up some money, so I just took the leap of faith.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned $1 Million Listing, and that's like one of the things that people always bring up when your name comes up in conversation. But I thought it was awesome that you said you're more proud of the Wall Street Journal article that you were on the cover. And that's really, man, where I'd love to like kind of hang out for the rest of the podcast on, is because of what that really meant in that trust that you're able to build with people. Because I think that's something that we can really use on this podcast to help someone.
Absolutely.
So maybe talk about that. Talk about the Wall Street Journal, and then we'll kind of wrap on the whole building trust with others, even if they don't even live in the freaking same country as you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm. Thank you so much for bringing that up. By the way, yeah, I'm very, very proud of it. One of the things that I do love about real estate is not only does your sphere of influence, right? So your friends become your clients. The aspect that I love about it being a people business are the fact that my clients end up becoming my friends. Maybe it's just the way I am. the positive, welcoming individual that I am, but it almost always ends up happening, right? There's always that deeper relationship that ends up happening. Because at the end of the day, especially when you're on the buyer side, even on the seller side, they're trusting you, selling your greatest asset, your biggest asset at the time. On the buyer side, you really go with the journey on this person, right? Figure out where they want to call home for the next few years, whether it's expanding a family and all this. So you're going on this huge journey with them throughout the city, figuring out what works for them. And there's no greater sense of fulfillment for me, at least, when we're at the closing table on the buy side and people are super excited about just moving into their new home. Yeah. So going back to the Wall Street Journal thing, it was actually phenomenal for my brand in general, just because it I brand myself as like the digital agent, new age digital agent. So it was about agents that leverage technology, but also sell properties sight unseen, meaning the client had never entered the property prior to going under contract for it. Yep. And for me, that actually happened twice. It's happened twice with that specific client, but 3 other times with other individuals. Just basically being able to sell properties through virtual reality. FaceTime tour was my main thing. Using that for a video tour, which I obviously implement basically daily when it comes to Instagram stories and things like that. But it was, it was a client of mine at the time. We actually hadn't really known each other that well. He was referred to me. I had sold his other place on the seller side prior, and he was actually going through some personal issues for the first purchase, in which he needed to purchase a condo, and he does a ton of traveling. He's actually out of the country more than he's in the country. And so the first one was a little bit easier. He was in London, I believe, and it was a relatively new condo. So, not too many issues that could arise from that, right? Sure. New construction, things like that. I was able to do the video tour with him, FaceTime. He ended up putting in an offer. I was able to show him a couple other units as well. I ended up putting in an offer. I was definitely nervous, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But he had heard about the building. He loved the area, all of that. Fast forward a couple years, the one that really made me nervous, but the one that really paid out and what was able to get us all this press was he was in Italy at that point, starting a new family. His significant other was pregnant, and they wanted to move to the suburbs, which wasn't my forte. I'm Dex in the city, right? So of course I would help him out on the buy side, and it was in a neighborhood called Bronxville up in Westchester County. Probably one of the best school districts. Like Clintons live up there, a bunch of other notable New York individuals as well. So probably top 2% in the school districts. Wow. So we go up there, and he really wanted Tudor style mansions. So we toured a couple. It ends up being a gut feeling with a lot of people. It just wasn't the right one. It wasn't the right few, I guess. He just didn't have the right gut feeling about it, like he did in the first purchase. And while he was in Italy, this one popped up, a classic English style Tudor, and it was beautiful from the outside. The inside definitely needed some renovations, right? And that was his whole goal. He wanted something that was perfect on the outside for him, but he was just going to gut it on the inside. And the thing that really worried me, though, is this thing was built in 1931. Wow. So, in New York, one thing about how we do transactions differently is a lot of apartments, they have common charges, managers, things on site. So we actually don't need to really do inspections. So this is the first time I had to, he had to trust me. Hey, listen, so this is definitely the spot, because then there was another bidder on it. Otherwise, I would have waited for him to come. Yeah. Beautiful home. There was another offer in on it, and he loved the outside, trusted me on the inside, but we had to get the inspector in there, make sure nothing was structurally damaged, because 1931, that's a long time with these New York winters and things like that. Oh yeah. So I was definitely nervous, no doubt about it. But he was very reassuring. He's like, I absolutely trust you. He'd always said, he's loyal to me, lifetime, a loyal lifetime client. And we ended up going under contract, waited for that glorious day for him to come back, with the family after he was under contract. Prior to closing, he loved it. Wow. He loved it. He was able to renovate it. And yeah, man. So it really goes back to what we were talking about. So building this platform of trust, right?
Yep, that's it.
I think in the real estate industry, so much, some people call it smoke and mirrors. A lot of people are very short-term thinking, and they just want to close this transaction. And I'm actually shocked by it.
Yep.
That they don't think long-term. They want to close a transaction. They just want to collect their check, whether it's even a rental or a sale. And then from there, they don't continue the relationship on, man.
Yeah.
We're in the people business at the end of the day.
Yep.
For me, you know, I feel like if you're a trusting individual and you just come off like that, and this is what happens when I interview people to work under me as well, as long as I get that sense that I can trust the person, then I feel like they're going to do relatively well in real estate. Obviously, there's other factors that play into it, but I think that's the biggest thing.
Yep.
And it's also the one thing that kind of can get certain real estate agents a bad rap for it. I don't know how it is down in South Carolina, but in New York, we don't necessarily, as a collective industry, have the best reputation.
Sure.
With all the types of press people are getting and things like that, and the real deal.
Yeah.
But I think without trust, man, you don't really have anything. Because at the end of the day, you're facilitating people buying their largest asset at the time and or selling it.
Dude, it's so important, that idea of being impeccable with your word and following through and doing what you're saying you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. But what you said there was so important because people just don't realize, and I'm thinking even like in your market and in your industry, the lifetime value of a client is insanely high if you treat them right.
Yeah.
Not just in the transactions that you'll receive over a lifetime through working with that individual, but the referrals. Like you said, you got that person as a referral from somebody else. Well, chances are you treated that somebody else extremely well, and you did what you said you were going to do, and you were extremely trustworthy for them to recommend you to this individual. But people just don't even. You're right. People are so short-sighted, and all they see is, okay, I've got a buyer. I found a house. Great. Let me get my commission check. Let me find another buyer. But it's all about building relationships. And that's something that I've just become so focused on these days is just relationships. Because in a down economy, which we'll be in at some point here in the probably not so distant future, relationships are what hold all the weight. And the relationships are what separates you from the how many agents did you say that there were in New York? Like 28,000 or something crazy?
28,000.
Yeah, 28,000. That's funny. I remember that number. 28,000 freaking real estate agents, which is incredible. So what are some of those other things that when you're meeting with someone, let's just say for the first time, what are some of those things? Like I know now having that Wall Street Journal article, you're able to use that as an incredible validation of like, hey, here's some of the things that I've done to show you like, look, these people were willing to put that trust in me sight unseen. That's obviously good. But what are some of those other things that you use just in the first few times you're meeting with someone to help build that rapport and then ultimately build that trust with them?
Yeah, I always build. Thank you very much for that, by the way. Yeah. It is definitely the best testimonial. I think back in the conference, somebody had talked about doing like picture testimonials. I don't think I can think of a better testimonial than that specific one, awesome. Especially because they quoted him in it and things like that. Wow. I don't like to meet them always at the property first and foremost. At the end of the day, like we said before, I'm in the people business, so I like to meet them in a cafe in the area. Okay. Part of my brand is I do deal with a lot of people that are out of town as well, so they may not know New York that well, right? Yeah. So part of my brand is having to know the history of the neighborhood, what the neighborhood has to offer. So we meet at a cafe, build that rapport prior, and then it's like, hey, let's go on our little tour throughout the day and find the perfect home for you. In addition to that, a lot of New York laws are very different. So we have mansion tax, all these different sort of fees that aren't really built in California or Florida, where I also do real estate. And so I'll typically meet them with a custom buyer guide, telling them who I am. It's like a personal, high quality pamphlet. Yeah. Telling them who I am, what to expect as a first time home buyer, what the process is going to look like, who my go-to mortgage broker is, who my go-to attorney, because we don't really use title companies, we use attorneys. Okay. Throughout the process. And it's basically, I pitch this as my team, right? The Dex in the City team. The individuals that I trust myself to go ahead and complete the transaction. and then laying out literally all of the costs, all the potential costs they're going to go through. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see newer agents doing. Maybe they don't know it. Maybe they haven't been taught to, but there's a lot of these hidden costs that end up coming into the transaction after they go under contract, and the client will look at the agent like, what the hell? I didn't know about this.
Sure.
It's because you don't properly educate your clients on it.
That's so smart. And I remember right out of college, I was a financial advisor, and I would be shocked how many other advisors, especially new advisors, young advisors, they wouldn't take the time to sit down and actually go through like how I get paid. But being able to sit across from a client and explain to them, like, you need to know how I get paid. And there's commissions that are built into these products that you're purchasing, and you need to know how that works. And to be able to line by line show them, like, by purchasing these type investments, this is what that's going to look like from a fee standpoint, whether it's an annual based fee or whether there's an upfront based commission with the purchase of certain financial products, to be able to sit there and outline it. It doesn't matter how crazy it is. Just the simple fact of laying it all out there and not having any of that stuff kind of pushed under the rug. Well, maybe they won't realize it. They're going to realize it. And the ones that attack that on the front end, it's like an instant rapport builder. Even if there's a little sticker shock, like even if it's like, hey, there's some fees involved in this, let's go through that. Even if those fees are higher than that person expected, compared to the person that had smaller fees but didn't tell them about it, they just kind of had to dig for it themselves later, and they're like, oh, that's how the guy got paid. That's a huge way to build trust. You're exactly right.
100%. Transparency is the biggest thing.
Yeah,
transparency is the biggest thing. And in terms of our industry, I mean, the commission always comes from the seller's side, which makes it obviously easier when you're dealing with a buyer. Yep. It can be easier, but at the same time, you're also working for free with no guarantee.
Sure.
So there's also that side of it.
Yeah.
But that's one aspect I do like. Obviously, the contracts are all signed up front prior to going to market on a property.
Yeah.
On the sales side.
So, Dex, got one last question for you before we wrap up, because I've literally got another podcast right when we get done with this. But I usually ask people what's one misconception that there may be about them that they like to set straight. But what I'd like to ask you is, what's kind of one misconception in general about real estate agents in New York City, or maybe about real estate agents that are closing deals in a hour-long television show, or but just what's a misconception that when the average person in America thinks about what's going down in the real estate market in New York, or just living in New York, dealing with real estate, that you would like to set straight for us?
It mainly goes in the second one you touched on, right? Everybody kind of sees the glitz and glam of reality TV, Instagram. I touched on it a little bit earlier, the smoke and mirrors. It's definitely the hardest city, even though it might be the highest volume in America, the hardest city to make it in real estate, and one of the hardest industries. The statistic is 87% of all real estate agents don't go into their fifth year. So that's basically 9 out of 10 drop out.
Wow.
9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Right? Which is huge. I mean, what other industry have you heard of that doesn't enter into their fifth year in the biz, right?
Wow.
So just to give you an idea of how cutthroat it is, I'd say the biggest misconception is that it's easy. One thing I kind of chuckle at is when a lot of people will reach out to me like, hey, how do I get started? We touched upon this at dinner.
Yeah.
But not only that, like, hey, I want to make this my side gig. I want to do it on the side. I laugh. I'm like, unless you're coming from a billionaire family and you have these insane connections and you don't really need to work that hard, there's no side gig with real estate. It's all in, and you're going to be working more than your corporate job 40 hours a week. I can guarantee that, if you want to be successful. It's at the end of the day, it's a result-based business. You get out what you put in, for sure. But it can also be very rewarding at the same time.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to discourage anybody from joining. At the end of the day, if the passion is there, you'll know right away. I mean, I'm walking through the streets of New York, even with my friends or with other people, and I'm always looking up at different buildings, noticing different apartments. Hey, that's an amazing loft, things like that. The passion's always really been there. I'm fascinated with people's living space. It tells a lot about an individual. And I'm right where I need to be in terms of career path.
Awesome, man. Well, tell everybody where they can find you online so that they can learn more about you, maybe connect with you. And like I said, you never know. There could be someone out here that may be in the market for real estate in New York. We've got an incredible viewership on this on this podcast. So where can everybody find you?
Absolutely, man. Would love to connect with everybody. On Instagram, it's at Dex and the City _ Facebook Dex and then the and sign, the City, or my personal Facebook Dex Lipovic.
Okay. And
my email is dex@compass.com.
Awesome. Very good. Well, man, dude, it's been a pleasure getting to know you better. And dude, kudos to you for moving from freaking California to New York and just setting out and saying, like, I'm going to do it. And, you know, like I was telling you about that interview with Drama, he was talking about just the ability to just live comfortably in the city that I know I'm supposed to be in and have friends and have a life and be financially just secure and to be just doing it. Like, kudos to you, man. There's nothing cooler than that, especially where you've been able to do that in such a cutthroat, difficult market. So, man, I have the utmost respect for you, and I can't wait to definitely continue our relationship long term. And I would really appreciate an invite to the Dex in the South Pacific.
I haven't been.
I mean, I'll just take like a quarter acre. I mean, I just need like a quarter acre.
Hey, man, I would love to build that in. Find a hotel group. So it's perfect for a hotel group. It's actually right next to Red Bull's resort. That island that has Red Bull's resort, like 2 islands down from Tony Robbins' resort. That's awesome. It's going to be crazy. I'll be dropping it on social media and YouTube fairly soon. We got the drone footage being filmed right now.
That's awesome. Well, very cool, man. Yeah, well, guys, with that, this is the BreadWinner podcast. Dex, thank you so much for being on. And as always, I'm your host, Tyler Harris, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the BreadWinner podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating on iTunes for a chance to be on the show. Send a screenshot of your iTunes rating to @TylerHarris page on Instagram, where he'll pick one person every single week. See you next time on the BreadWinner podcast.